And welcome to part 2, where we'll work with some variables and some statements and some concatenation. I'm going to give that tag an ID because that helps JavaScript ID parts of your web page. So within the H1, I'm just going to say ID equals, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm just going to call it title. It'll be lowercase, it'll have quotes. IDs should be in quotes, so they identify them as an ID, but it'll say H1 ID equals title, and you can see it's color-coded right now. If you don't put a quote on it, you'll get a lot of things in red, which kind of indicates an error. So make sure that you finish that off, and your regular text should show up in black, and you'll get the feel of it, of the code hints or the code coloring as you work. But that's all I'm doing. I'm just identifying that H1 tag, which is a header. That's that my first page. I'm identifying that with an ID of title. It doesn't affect the way it looks. It just helps you identify it. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify it with JavaScript code. So that means we have to go in the script tag inside here. So I'm going to hit return, and I'm going to do one of those document.getElement by ID. Now, if you're not sure how to type this, and then in parentheses, I'm going to put the ID name. But if you're not sure how to type this, it's called camel case. So it starts with a small g, capital E, and then all the other words get capital letters. So that's how you can remember it's get element by ID. It's a small g and then a capital E, a capital B, and a capital I, and D is small. And then there's a parentheses here, and it starts with document because you're talking about within the document object model. So it's talking about the document. You're getting an ID, and the one we're getting, and I'm going to put in quotes, is going to be title. So I'm going to be getting the document, getting the element by ID. So right now I'd be getting the H1 element. Now that's all I'm getting is the element. If you want to get the text, my first page that's in here, what you want to do is you want to do .inner HTML. Outer HTML would actually be the tags, but inner HTML is actually this my first page. So I'm getting the element by ID. So whatever element it is, if it's called title, and you would only use IDs are supposed to be used only one time. So you wouldn't have anything else with that same ID name. They're unique. So you'd want to make sure it's only getting that one. And then I'm going to put a semicolon just to finish that statement. Now this doesn't really do anything. It just gets it It doesn't do anything. What we want to do is we can actually highlight that, and we could paste it in here if we wanted to. I could paste this whole statement inside here, and it would actually display that. And I don't have this on the instructions, but let's say I pasted this thing inside here and I ran the code. Now I'd probably get an error anyway, because I have 2 semicolons in here or something like that. Let me just run it again. Okay, there it is. It says my first web page. So it's actually using that. So it's actually getting that text and it's putting in the alert window. But that's kind of awkward and it's kind of wordy. We have all this stuff in here in parentheses, and we have parentheses inside of parentheses. So I wouldn't want to do that. What we do is we use something called variables to represent this. So I want something to this long line of code. It's not super long, but I'm going to make a variable that represents that. So I'm going to do var, which basically starts to declare a variable, and I'm going to say equals, and actually I don't want to just say var equals, I want to give my variable a name, and I'll just call it x. Let's just say it's x. I'll say var x equals whatever this is. So we already know what this is. This right here is equal to my first page. So whatever's here gets translated here. So that's what, and then x represents that. It's just a little shortcut that represents that. And I'm going to do another one. I had my name in here. I'm also going to do another one. I'll make another variable. I'll say var, and I'll just call it y. We'll do like we're doing algebra. And I'll say var y equals, and I'll call this just Richoma. I'll just put my name in here. And you could put your name in here. Okay, so what I'll do now, and make sure that you put semicolons after any of these statements, put a semicolon. And what we did here is we declared a variable. We said the variable with the name of x is set to this value, and the variable with the name of y is set to this value. And again, we did 2 things. We not only declared a variable, but we initialized it. We basically gave it its value as well. We could have just said var x and been done with it, and then it just means you have a variable named x and you didn't give it any value yet. But we're declaring it and we're giving it a value. X is basically my first web page, and y is basically my name. So we have those variables set up. That's what x and y means within our script tags right now. So how about if we just alert the x and the y, and we can actually go in here and we can do x plus y. And what that should do is it should put my first web page and Rich Homa, and it should put my name. So let's just try it out. I'll run the code, and there it is. It says my first web page, Rich Homa. Now, if you look at this closely, it just kind of jams it all together. There's no space between my first web page and Rich Homa. And besides, it doesn't really read correctly. It should say like by Rich Homa or something. It should say by with that. So what we're going to do is put by in here. Now to do that, this is something that's called concatenation. It's basically, I guess you could kind of consider this concatenation, but we're going to be, these are variables. Remember, x and y, and we're just kind of joining variables. And we're using an operator, which is the plus sign. You could do it with variables. You can also do it with numbers. That's how we did the 5 plus 6 equals 11. And this is an operator. But what we're going to do is we're going to join a string in here, which is the word by. So we're combining variables and strings together. And to do that, you have to concatenate it with the plus sign. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put the word by in quotes because it's a string. And then I also have to put plus on either side. And I'll put spaces in there just to space it out. You don't need the spaces on either side of these, but I'll put it there just so it looks nicer. So now it should say x, which is my first web page, by, and then y, and it should say Rich Homa, whatever y is. So if I run this right now, it'll say my first web page by Rich Homa, except, again, we have the same problem. By is all scrunched in there. There's no space on either side of by. Now to do that, I'll have to, a space is actually part of a string. You know, a space is a character. So if I put a space in here within the by string on either side, that should give a space on either side of the word by, and it should work out okay. So let's try it out. There it is, my first web page by Rich Homa. And what we did is we used variables, we concatenated them, or joined them together with a string, and we still have a semicolon to finish this off. And remember, strings always have quotes in them. The quotes are around by and the space. The quotes do not go around variables. And that's what's happening in that alert right now. Now, if we wanted to change something, let's say I wanted to change my name, I would change it here. I could say, you know, let's say I want to put Professor Homa or something, and I could put that in there. I could run the code. Because a variable y is representing that, I could run the code, and it'll do the same thing, and except it'll update that to Professor Homa. But that's what I have right now. And then also, if I want to, let's say I want to change this, and I want to have it my first web page with JavaScript, since that's what we're really doing. A lot of you probably have made a web page before. If I change that, and I run it, now first of all, it's going to change it. It's going to change it here because it's part of the H1 tag. Another thing it'll do, it's changing it here, my first web page with JavaScript by Professor Homa. So it's also changing it there because it's pulling that into here, which is using it as the X, and then the Y is my name. The X is that first line that's in the H1 tag, and then the Y is really my name. So I'm adding all that stuff together. So that's just, it's a little example of just kind of using some variables and having them write something to an alert window, or it could also write it to the page. Now, you may not use, you know, X and Y. If you're using, you know, numbers, that may help, but X and Y doesn't mean anything. You may want to use something that's more semantic. You may see that term in your reading, semantic. That means it means something to you. So you might have var X instead of being X. You might have it be, you could call it title, or maybe you'll just say my title or something, just so it's a little different than the ID. Sometimes it's confusing to people. Not that you couldn't have a variable being the same thing as an ID, but you know, using the same name sometimes confuses people. So let's say you call that my title, and you call this my name. And you could certainly use variables like that. And please read this section in W3 Schools with variables, because there's rules about variables. You can't have start off with a number. You can't have spaces and things like that. Case is important, so if you use all, you know, I try to use all lowercase, or you might use camel case, but right now I'm just using lowercase. And now if I change those variables and I ran it, I'm going to get an error, and I get an error called undefined. Usually it'll say undefined, but this says not defined. And what that means is it's looking for a variable that's not defined anywhere, because we now changed our variables to that, and they don't exist here. So now I would have to update this. So that, you know, that's something that, you know, one of the errors in the beginning, you'll see those errors all the time, undefined, because either you spelled things differently or the case is different. They have to be exactly. And sometimes what helps is doing like a copy and paste, and that way, you know, whatever you do, it makes it consistent. So, you know, it's my title, my name, that those whatever you defined you're using again. And notice you define it once, or you declare it once using the var keyword. That's a keyword, var. And you can't do this. You can't say var or anything like that. Var has to be lowercase var. So keep that var, and basically once you declare it, you don't have to use var anymore. It just recognizes it within these scripts as my title and my name. It knows to basically link up to my title is going to be this line, whatever you put in there, and my name is going to be whatever we have here. So if you change this, you know, I'll just put it back again. I'll put Richard this time. I'll put my full name, and now I'll run the code again, and you can see I have my first web page with JavaScript by Richard Homa, concatenating two different variables together in this little kind of alert window. Now that's all I need you to do for your first exercise. I know this is real simple, but I just want you to just get used to playing around in the sandbox a little bit, is using this JS. And I'm also going to save this. So I'll save this. And one thing, when you first save it, it puts a number in here, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'd like you to do is actually, when you save it, just highlight over that number and just call this ex1-alert. So that way we know that's our first exercise, ex1 alert, which is, again, it's real simple, but I just want you to play around with this a little bit and get familiar. So your full address now is going to be this. It's going to be js.do your last name 235 /ex1 alert. So hopefully you remembered what your password was and your username is this. And then when you ever need to go to a start window, you could go down here. But I'll save the update right here, and it's now saved. And now when I click on my name, it'll show me all the saved ones. Now what you can do is you could highlight this. You could highlight it in the window or highlight it here and just email this to me. Now I'll click back on this again, and there's my saved code. It saved my code. It saved my exercise. So you didn't have to do it in brackets. You didn't have to save it to a file in a folder, any of that. It's saved online, and when you want to send it to me, you could just go up here. You could just go up to your window, copy this, put it in an email, and paste it in an email, and I'll have your URL of your first exercise. So ex1 alert, that's pretty much it. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. I will also have written instructions to follow along with this. Again, it's real simple, just a little start out kind of exercise. Hopefully you watched the first video as well. And that's all you have to do right now.